Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for coming to my 90-minute session. We're going to start with an introductory talk on GNU Thaler, followed by some demonstration, and then maybe you get to do some work. And of course, first of all, feel free to ask questions at any time. We have plenty of it. I want to start with what I learned yesterday from Alain, that we should start a talk with a joke. And apparently the only polite joke with economists is a self-deprecating economist joke. Now, since I'm not an economist, I have to borrow one from a big economist. So may I present Augustus Carstens. He's going to set the theme for today. And he's going to also at the same time explain to us what a central bank digital currency actually is.
On CBDC in particular for the use of the general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash. And there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is. On our analysis on C.
Okay, I'm afraid it wasn't maybe that funny. Yeah. But it was certainly self-deprecating. Just absolute control is the goal, yeah. Right? Yeah. Okay, now, what is Thaler? I'm always thought you've got lots of Thalers, so I'm going to explain the different Thalers here. So first of all, Thaler is an open payment protocol. So protocols, you might know the Internet Protocol, HTTP is a protocol. So it's just a standard of how computers talk to each other to, in this case, make payments. Okay. Now, we also have GNU Thaler, which is a free Libre software payment system infrastructure project. So it's actual software that implements the Thaler protocol with all of the surrounding components. You need integrations with the payment system, with existing core banking, with merchants, and so on. And we have a community around it that wants to see it deployed as widely as possible. We also have Thaler Systems SA, which is a company that's offering commercial support for banks, central banks, merchants, or even customers that want to use the solution. So that's the main different Thalers. Now, so what is Thaler? Well, first of all, Thaler is not a currency or a speculative asset. It's just a payment system. We don't need a cryptocurrency. We pay in euros, in Swiss francs. So, sorry, I'm not trying to sell you a coin here. Would have been so good, such an opportunity to invest. Anyway, it's also not supposed to be for a long-term store of value. It's really for your day-to-day purchases. So think small amounts, a couple of euros, couple of €100, not your life savings. Those presumably are better kept in a bank account. It's also not a network or an instance of a system. What do I mean by that? Well, if you look at MasterCard, Visa card, PayPal, there is this one global operator that operates a network or an instance where everybody has to be docked into. Here, it's really every bank, every payment service operator could operate it by themselves. They might federate, but there's not one thing, right? So many banks can operate the system independently of each other. It's also not decentralized. You have a centralized operator, usually a regulated entity like a bank. What is decentralized is the holding of the assets. So everybody holds their actual digital cash in their own wallet. And so the data in terms of the assets and what maybe your contracts that you have done, that's decentralized. But the actual system is always having a centralized operator that we trust because it can be regulated. And maybe important, we do not use a blockchain. We don't use proof of work or proof of stake. So we are extremely efficient compared to those solutions and actually also compared to other existing payment systems. Now, when we built the system, we started with 9 design principles, and these come in order. And if you change the order of these principles, you will get a different design. So it's important to say, okay, what's our first goal? And our first goal is that we want to have it implemented as free software. Now, I have to explain here that free does not stand for gratis. It stands for freedom or liberty. And it encompasses the 4 key freedoms: the freedom to run the code that you usually always have if you have a license, but also the freedom to study the source code, the freedom to modify the source code, and the freedom to pass on those modifications to others. That means we as the developers are not controlling our users. They can evolve the software themselves, adapt it to their needs, or ask others to help them make these adaptations. We believe this is very critical because payments infrastructure is a critical infrastructure and you can't make yourself dependent on a particular vendor. The Europeans currently criticize their own dependence on Americans, but you don't want to make yourself dependent on some company that then might be bought by some foreign entity, or that might then charge you crazy amounts of money for their operation. It's also software, which means it's not a hardware-based solution. We wanted to have really a solution that works purely in software. Now, the second goal we had is we want to protect the privacy of buyers. So when I spend my money, I should be able to do so anonymously, without being traced, without being linked to previous purchases, really the maximum we can possibly have there. And that shouldn't be by trusting the operator, it should really be by cryptographic design. So it is literally impossible for the operator to link the purchase back to an individual user as long as some other user had enough money to pay for it, at least in theory. Now, the third goal we said is, okay, it's good to have privacy when I spend my money, but I also do not want to have criminal activity on the network. I want to be compliant with regulations, so whoever receives money, they should be identified. Hello, Alan.
My apologies.
You're welcome. I followed your advice and started with a joke, but nobody laughed. So, we want to make sure that income is transparent so that states can, well, build schools, fund our universities, make sure the network is not abused for criminal activity, because if I know who is receiving the money, well, then the criminal will not last very long. So these were the 3 main goals, which surprisingly seem to very well align with economics. As we have heard earlier at this conference, this seems to be the economically optimal model, because the third one means it's very easy to audit the businesses. We see how much income they make. And on the other hand, there is no privacy cost to the consumers when they spend their money. So it turns out, thank you for your proof, that this is also the economically optimal model. Now, it is a payment system, and as some people have said, well, when you do a payment system, eventually you learn you're actually running a fraud detection system. So we also want to prevent any kind of payment fraud, in particular things like double spending. You know, we identify the recipient, therefore we can show this to the person who makes the payment and make it clear who they are paying. So fraud prevention is, of course, also a key goal here. And once we've achieved the first 4, then for the rest, we also want to disclose only the minimum of information necessary. Privacy by default, privacy by design. Now, this, for example, means the contract between the merchant and the customer is between those two. I, as a payment service provider, don't necessarily get to see it. The state auditor might get to see it when they audit the business, but I don't as an operator. Or the customer is making a payment into a bank account of a merchant, while we do not disclose the IBAN number of the merchant to the customer. So in all other aspects, also, disclose the minimum of information necessary, as long as the first goals are met. Well, then we actually want users. So it better be a usable system, I hear. People are used to payments being easy. It should be efficient. We do not want to burn down the planet. We want to avoid single points of failure. Now, we do have a bank or a central bank operating the system, which of course means, well, if the central bank prints too much money, that could be a problem. If the bank goes bankrupt, the system goes down. But other than that, we can have multiple replicated databases, multiple servers, multiple operators of these servers. So all of these things. And different components of the system can be operated by different entities. So if you are a merchant, you might need a merchant backend, but you can have somebody operating this for you who is not the payment service operator. So those are the key design principles we followed and continue to follow when developing the software. And when there's basically a question where we have a trade-off here, this is the answer book. High-level architecture. The system usually begins with the customer who has installed a Thaler wallet on their device, and they will tell their bank, hey, I want to withdraw digital cash. Please do a wire transfer to the central bank or exchange operator's account. And then in return, the operator will issue digital coins to the customer's wallet. We can associate the Thaler wallet with the wire transfer we get here by putting in the right wire transfer subject. It allows us to link the wire transfer to the wallet of the customer. Here, in the withdrawing of coins, we use an old trick called blind signatures, which is an efficient way to sign the digital cash without us basically learning the serial numbers of the cash. So we don't know which customer is receiving which coin. So when the customer later spends the coins at a merchant, we don't know which of our customers did the withdrawal. Now, the merchant then basically has to deposit the coins immediately back with us. And the reason is, well, the customer can make copies. And the customer can lie and just double spend the money. So the merchant who receives money has to immediately clear it with us, and we will check in our database, have I seen this coin, this liability of mine before? If I have, I actually have a proof that I've seen it before, and we'll send it back to the merchant saying, you're double spending, or your customer is trying to double spend. Otherwise, I have to send him a message back saying, okay, I will send you the money. This was a first time spent. Everything is good. Proceed with your business logic. Now, we will eventually do a wire transfer then to the merchant, but not immediately. The merchant can specify us do it at the end of the day, at the end of the month, so we can aggregate many micro-transactions that happen in this domain into one macro-transaction that happens here. So you can really think of this very similar to you go to the ATM to withdraw cash, and the merchant at the end of the business day goes to his bank and gets everything into his bank account. Yes?
On your design principles as well, before you said like free software, I'm just wondering, said like, if you say that whoever is operating it can modify the software, can say undo 2 to 9 if they want, or like. So yeah, just trying to understand what is like.
Of course,
set in a system that somebody who decides to use it cannot change versus can.
You can change the software in any aspect. What is interesting here is that the blinding for the anonymity is done on the customer's device. Okay. So I can change the exchange software in any way I want. It will not give me the ability to link the customer because it's done on the customer's device. And so in fact, the fact that you have the software on your device and you can give it to any computer scientist to say, does it implement this correctly? Mm-hmm. And if they tell you yes, then you know you have the privacy assurances of the system. And whenever any entity here cheats, basically the others would notice because the digital signatures would not match. So if the exchange sends a signature back to the merchant saying, well, I'm not going to pay you the right amount, he will have the cryptographic proof from the customer of the right amount. You have the bad signature from the exchange. And here we have an auditor, which typically would mostly audit the exchange database, which accumulates cryptographic proofs of correctness of the operation. And it would also usually, of course, audit the bank account transfers to make sure that they correspond to those proofs. But if you got some bad messages from the exchange, you could equally go to the auditor and say, look, this is the protocol. This guy is not following the protocol. So we have cryptographic proofs of correct operation, and the privacy properties depend on software that is under our control. As consumers.
Privacy software is in my device, like the other things, like if somebody wants to allow double spending.
Now, of course, the income transparency is here with the regulated entity. He sees how much money the merchant makes. Mm-hmm. So we always make sure that any entity could modify their software, but only to do themselves harm. Mm-hmm. Or be detectable by others, and then, of course, the auditor could step in and say, you're trying to cheat here.
Yeah, it like seems to be making things harder, like to allow like modifications rather than like let's say your company manages the software licensing and then making the code visible but not modifiable.
Right. Yeah, it's much harder, but on the other hand, it's a much stronger security model because you have to always from the beginning think, well, it's not like I can have any assurance that the software I'm writing is the one anybody is going to use. So when we look at the wallet software, it's going to say, okay, I have to protect myself against those two. When I write this guy, I have to go, okay, I have to prove everything is correct to the auditor, and I have to protect myself against those two. And if I'm the merchant, I basically have to again go and say, well, I have to protect myself against the customer doing something wrong. I can have some trust in this guy because he's a regulated entity. So if he signs a message, I'm going to send you the money. But I will we actually have checks and verifications. So when the money arrives in my bank account, the software here will check that the amount that arrived matches the amount that I was expecting to get. Also, we do reconciliation. So we can, if the amount is wrong, we would report this, of course, again. No?
Do you have this superimposed on the status quo on what currently happens in the world? Not on a blockchain system, but just in a retail structure? So how different is it? Is another way of asking that question.
First of all, there's lots of different existing retail payment systems out there, so you can't just superimpose it against all of them. But in general, I believe there's none that uses, except for some blockchain solution that uses a similar level of cryptographic signatures, that you have everything always signed. With card tokenization, we start to have some of these signatures and cryptography used in card payments, but not to this extent. And in none of these systems you have any kind of privacy for the consumer, really in none. And the idea that the payment service operator is audited in real time and that we can check that they have the right amount of balance to cover their liabilities, I have not seen this.
And just a corollary to that, interchange fees.
Mm-hmm.
How do that play?
Well, we do have this little bubble here which says fees. So again, the payment service operator could charge fees for their operation. So the protocol has built-in fees. And thank you for the point, it's quite interesting. So the fees usually are suggested to happen on deposit or on the wire transfers. So when a merchant goes and says, please send me a wire transfer every 5 seconds, well, if the wire transfer costs me 5 cents, I might want to be reimbursed for that super fast settlement. Now, the deposit fees, we usually recommend over simply only withdrawal fees, which we could have also, because then the merchant can go and say, I'm willing to cover those, and the customer doesn't see them. We know this that in most payment methods, you don't see the fees charged by the payment system, and so deposit fees are an easy one that the merchant can hide. And what usually happens is the merchant can signal to the customer, I'm willing to cover deposit fees up to a certain amount. And if the customer chooses a payment service provider that has higher fees, because again, there could be multiple, and the merchant could accept multiple, then it could be the merchant goes and says, well, the common fees for these transactions are 2 cents, so I'm willing to pay 3 cents. And if you pick the operator that charges 10 cents, then you have to cover 7 cents, and I'll pay the remaining 3. So again, incentive-wise, we made it so that the customer has a reason to choose a cheap operator, because then most likely the merchants will cover the entire fee.
So who needs to have the software? Like, okay, customer needs
Everybody needs to have software.
I mean, like, is this merchant has to have like additional ones as well, or
We will.
Yeah.
First of all, of course, the customer has to have software on their computer. The bank operator has to run our software. Now, for the merchant, we have some canonical backend that does all the cryptographic processing and the transaction processing. But if you have some like e-commerce front end or some point of sale system, you might need to integrate it with that. So you can't just, well, in some simple cases, what we have is enough, as we'll see later. But in general, of course, people have to integrate it in some form or other. Now, I also want to talk one more Thaler, namely NGI Thaler. So NGI is the Next Generation Internet Initiative of the European Union. And they are funding us since December 2023 to deploy GNU Thaler across Europe. We are partnering with 3 financial institutions, GLS Bank, Magnet Bank, and Visual West, 2 academic institutions, my university and TU Eindhoven, 3 SMEs, and 3 nonprofits over the 3 years to get this done. And so GLS Bank and Magnet Bank within the next couple of months should start deploying the system in their domain. We are already operating it in Switzerland for a few months now. And the academic partners, of course, do some of the research work. Yeah, timeline, we have actually deployed this first at our university internally, so students could go to the secretary with their digital cash, and then we had a snack machine, really a big fridge-like snack machine like you would see in train stations, which we bought on research money. And we had a bachelor student integrate the payment system into that snack machine. That was a fun project for them, I'm sure. And so they could buy snacks there. We now also have a coffee machine that can support Thaler payments. Coffee is important for some people. Then we started deploying it as a regional currency in Basel. There's a 20-year-old regional currency in Basel called Netzbon. They used physical cash and wanted to digitize. They heard about our solution and said, hey, we want this. And I said, oh, great, a place that doesn't exactly suffer from regulation. So they have this limited scope and they know the shops that accept it because they're members. So we didn't have to do all the KYC and AML checks for them. And they're operating it, so I'm not legally liable, best case. So they've been deploying this. And now, about half a year later, we started deploying it in Switzerland with regulation and a regular bank account. And so now all Swiss businesses and residents can, in principle, transact with Thaler. Yeah, and next ones is Hungary and GLS Bank in Europe. When exactly, we have to talk to the lawyers. Yeah, so if you want to talk to the public operators, there's the Netzbon website and their production API. Here is our website for the Swiss operation and our production API. And GLS Bank has already also started putting up a website for the project on their side. Now, in terms of software, what did we have to do? Well, we have to build a couple more things than what I had on the initial slide. There is what we call LibUF Nexus. It's our EBIX integration. Who here knows what EBIX is? Okay, that's the protocol how you can talk to your bank to do automatic transfers. So for example, if you're a large business that does payroll in Europe, you're most likely using EBIX to pay all of your employees. You don't sit down and do 1,000 transactions by hand every month, right? You have some computer do this. And this is the protocol that banks use in Europe to allow large businesses typically to look at incoming wire transfers for reconciliation and to do outgoing wire transfers as part of their business. So this is what usually like an SAP system or other ERP systems would use to talk to European banks. We also built our own little bank for testing purposes that we use for demonstration and for regional currencies. Now this is a very limited bank because it doesn't do credit. It doesn't do all of the fun contracts Alan was talking about. It's really just doing the simple payments. We have the merchant backend where we have some inventory and order management functionality. We integrated this into various e-commerce solutions like Joomla, Magento, WooCommerce, Drupal, and so on. We implemented some logic for our KYC processes like address validation, be it postal addresses or SMS. We have the core system, which had to be enhanced with AML and KYC processes so that if we cross certain thresholds, we can check is this a plausible transaction, block transactions, check sanction lists, and so on. And we had to, of course, build wallets for all the common operating systems like Android, Chrome, Firefox, iOS, and so on. Again, everything we do is free software.
Yeah, also out of curiosity, with like KYC things, is it like also at the level of software that is in the consumer's mobile or like computer that, or you trusting the fact that like the transfer is coming from a bank or something that has done KYC, there is no additional KYC at in the individual level. I understand because you want to have the receipts and merchants, KYC is a different matter. So
you would think that because the money comes from a bank that has done KYC and goes to a bank that has done KYC, we wouldn't need to do KYC. Yeah, we had hoped so for a long time too. And interestingly, if this is a central bank, they call this the two-tiered model, and they plan on doing exactly this. However, we are not allowed as a financial service provider going to say, oh, some other financial service provider has done the KYC. We have to do it ourselves. Now, fortunately, as long as we only receive money, in this case from Swiss bank accounts and only send it to Swiss bank accounts, the KYC requirements only kick in after a certain amount. So only once you cross 2,500 Swiss francs per month, then we have to do KYC. But we can't just say it goes to a Swiss bank account, that bank has done some KYC, therefore we don't need to. No, every financial company in the chain has to do the KYC process themselves.
But that is by regulation.
That's by regulation. It's not by technology, no.
Yeah.
We could totally turn it off if it was legal.
Yeah, because like there is no way necessarily to get money in, let's say, customer account without somebody having done KYC, because you can restrict like.
Right, yeah, we know basically we start with white money. Because it's coming from a regular Swiss bank account. And we only allow small amounts to come into the system as well. So you can't just go, I'm going to withdraw 100,000 euros on day one. It's not going to work. You're limited to 2,500 per month. And so we can have transaction limits on everything. But still, if these certain limits are crossed, we have to do KYC or KYB of the respective business partners. And I should also mention the picture here is a bit simplified because we say customer merchant. We also allow peer-to-peer payments. And there, if you do one payment from one mobile phone to another mobile phone, well, then it's not going into a bank account. And so again, you have to do the KYC on the target phone. You just have to be able to do that. One thing to mention, the browser integrations are real fun here on the technological side, because browsers gives you a very limited set of interfaces to work with. So, for example, the European Central Bank does not intend to support anything except Android and iOS. I think that's part of their sovereignty initiative to make us independent of big tech. So we actually support more platforms. We also support Ubuntu Touch, command line, and so on. The problem with Chromium Firefox is you really have to build your technology around the restrictions from the browser. But it has some really cool effects, as we'll see in a bit. Now, what can we do today? And what we will try in the demo is we can add a Thaler provider to your wallet if it's not already in there. We can withdraw digital cash via SEPA transfer. That I cannot exactly demonstrate because the SEPA transfer takes a bit long and you'd have to be in Switzerland, and the Swiss banks don't do instant SEPA yet. We have tested this with the GLS bank. There it takes literally 15 seconds between, you initiate the wire transfer and you have the money in your wallet. In Switzerland, it takes longer. The Swiss are slow people. We can also put digital cash back into your bank account. We can make peer-to-peer payments. We can set up our merchant site, do e-commerce, receive payments, and you can set up your own regional currency or event currency. You can also set up your own bank. I don't recommend that to the academics. It's a bit painful. But if you have a local event, we have had several events that basically just ran for a couple of days and that said, we want to set up an event currency, do our own payment system on site, and they use this already for that. Yeah, there's more we're working on backups for the wallets, distribute zero-knowledge key backups, messages to remote wallets. So right now, when you do peer-to-peer payments, you have to be in proximity or send some URL. But if you want to look up, say, a phone number or email address and map that to a Thaler wallet, that's Mailbox Taldir. And we're working with Adorsis to automate withdrawal using the PSD2 APIs. Right now, you have to manually say, okay, dear bank, please do this wire transfer. With the PSD2 open banking gateways, we should be able to automate that process a bit further and make it more convenient to withdraw for people. Now, why am I talking here? Well, GNU Thaler is a bit unique. It's a free software payment system, which has, in my view, big advantages because it's all open. You can inspect it, you can understand it as academics. It is originating from research. We started with the cryptography at universities with a PhD thesis. And then, well, it escaped from the lab and is now actually in production. Took 10 years, and we are still open for research, which means there are opportunities for collaboration. And I wanted to present you one of those that we're doing more recently. And that's oral information management. So OIM is a design practice with the goal of getting illiterate and enumerate people to be able to use financial applications. So if you can't read text, that's a problem for financial applications. Now imagine you can't even read numbers. Well, that's going to be really hard for you to deal with financial applications. And OIM is an approach that comes out of research and has a couple of principles. And first, of course, it must enhance the client-side usability for them. It also should enable clients to skill up, to learn how to deal with numbers and become more literate as they use the software. Design itself is client-guided, so you have to work with the target user groups to understand their problems, understand what would help them. And last but not least, when you use these designs, you don't want to embarrass these users by having like the child mode. It should look reasonably natural, and it should be easy to use the system without going and saying, okay, I want to put this into the dumb mode, and I'm going to be, oh, I'm using this, what is he doing there? It should look natural to the rest of people. Even normal users should be able to go, oh yeah, I like this one, I prefer this interface. Oh.
Can we see it? Do you have any UX?
Of course I have it on this one. Later.
Thank you.
Later. I have a prototype.
Great.
Now, who is affected? Well, there are a couple of illiterate people in the world, about 1 billion, 750 million. Most of them tend to be women, double the rate of men. So this is not something that doesn't affect anybody. And it's when we talk about financial inclusion, some people talk about access to bank accounts or access to credit. What about access to payment? Seems to be an even more basic need. Here's an example of how bad it is. So they had some study here in Myanmar and Cote d'Ivoire. What percentage cannot read a single-digit number? Single-digit number. Oh. And by long number, here what they mean is 4-digit. Oh. So an official literacy rate in Myanmar is 10%, in Cote d'Ivoire is 51%. And yes, sometimes the numeracy is a bit higher or a bit lower than this, but it is a significant problem in these countries, even to the point of not just literacy, but numeracy, understanding numbers. And we sent our developer recently to Cote d'Ivoire for usability studies, and he came back and said, yeah, some of these people, you can give them the digit 3, and they don't recognize it. So, yeah, here's an example of the design work they did, because one of the things they do recognize is they do recognize money, because that's what they work with. And so here they basically have their money that they can choose from, including here coins. You can swipe it over if it doesn't fit on the screen. And here you see the amount that's on the table. And we always at the same time show the amount in numeric representation so they can learn. So as the amount on the table changes, the amount here changes. And here is the amount that they own in the wallet. And if you just open it, this is in the middle of the payment process, you basically are shown your balance in bills and coins. Well, we also made sure that everything, all of the operations are done pictographically. So what does this mean? Give me money. Okay, good. What is this? Put it in where?
Savings.
Put it in savings, into a bank account, yes. Withdraw it. And pay. Okay, good. Now you read Chinese and any other language if it's as long as it's using symbols, right?
How do you know that would work?
We did usability studies. Science, right? So we had 21 local women speaking 6 local languages, briefly briefed on how to send money in the OIM prototype. So they're briefly shown the application. Then 4 of these had completed primary school. 6 could read a 5-digit number. So we first also checked that they were not exactly literate. And after 24 hours later, after first introduction, they were given a Thaler wallet with a random amount in it. And were asked to count the money, so how much money is in there, and then do 8 tasks to send another person a certain amount. Also, in the end, the process would generate a QR code, which the other person had to scan. And this kind of thing, you have to, of course, tell them first how that works. So 16 completed all asked 8 tasks without any errors. 4 completed all 8 tasks on the second try, but without help, and only 1 didn't. So now we're going to do another usability study in Freetown next week, I think, with an improved version of the interface. We also got feedback from them. So one of them said this much is much better than AfriMoney. Everybody would use it. It's simple. You can correct your mistakes. We also asked them if it were available, how would they use it? They said they would like to use it, prefer to existing apps, and would share it with their friends, relatives, especially with those that had trouble with reading and numbers. So that's the voice of the users. You think it would work? Maybe. Yeah, more is happening with finance in academia. We're working with TU Eindhoven on a post-quantum safe version of our protocol. So if the quantum computer came along, we would still be secure. We're adding the ability to buy subscriptions and discount tokens. By discount tokens, think of the usual, 10 pizzas, the 11th is for free. So you collect these tokens, but digitally as opposed to on paper. We have a fun project within Elnet where it's about privacy preserving tax-deductible donation receipts. So you donate to some charity, you want to donate anonymously, but you still want to give your tax authority a receipt saying, I donated. And we can do this, and the tax authority will not learn to which charity you donated, but they do get the total amount you donated that year. But the tax authority does see how many donations each charity got. So they first register the charities, and then they will see that his charity got 10,000, his charity got 50,000, and they can audit the charities that they can't just issue donation receipts for a larger amount. And they can say, you donated to one of our registered, approved charities. We just don't know to which one. So that's our donor system. We would need some government support to roll it out because, of course, the tax authorities have to accept these tax receipts and register the charities that they would consider eligible for tax-deductible receipts.
So the discount tokens, again, like who sees it? I imagine that it is in the customer wallet.
Yeah, the discount tokens.
It can be seen by the merchant, but like can anybody else see it? I'm just like thinking.
No. The discount tokens is
one can conclude what somebody bought based on the discount.
No, the discount token is between you and your pizzeria.
Okay.
In fact, the pizzeria sees that you have whatever 10 discount tokens, but they're again using blind signatures, so they don't know which of the customers got them earlier. They just know you got 10 of them that were not spent before, and nobody else gets to see them ever. Okay. And really, when you present your 10 discount tokens, or your one for 20% off, they just say, okay, it's one of the customers we issued these tokens before, they can't recognize it, and they can't link it to the original transaction. And the same is for subscriptions. Here again, you buy a subscription, but you're not trackable via your subscription. Every time you basically prove in zero knowledge to the newspaper, I'm one of your subscribers, and they learn, yep, it's one of our current subscribers for this month or this week or this year, but that's all they learn. So they also can't profile you and figure out, that's her reading habits. So again, we preserve the privacy properties we have in all of these applications.
Do you have plans to align, for example, charity-related contacts with existing statutes in different countries? Because in the United States, to be eligible for a deduction to a contribution, the entity receiving the contribution has to be certified by the Internal Revenue Service as a 501c3.
Right, that's what we're talking about when we said the donor has to register the charities. So in this case, it would be exactly as I said, the tax authority, in your case, the IRS.
It's not the donor. It's the
the DONOW, donation authority.
Oh, okay.
We said the protocol is called the DONOW protocol. So the donation authority, as an IRS tax authority, has to recognize the charities first. If that's your, specific US status that you have to have for a charity, that's fine. If it's Switzerland, it's a different regulation. Again, the tax authority has to first recognize the charity and gives basically the charity the ability to issue these receipts.
And when today in the States, when you file your return, you have to identify the charity by name.
Right.
And address and all this. And in your records, you have to have a receipt from the charity that identifies you as a donor and the amount of money that you're donating.
Yeah. So in our case, the receipt actually does identify who made the donation. So we have the taxpayer ID in it. But of course, we specifically do not disclose which charity you donated to.
Right, but that's required information on U.S. federal tax return.
Right. Again, I think if in the case where you do not have a cryptographic proof that you donated to one of the exempt charities, it makes sense to require this. In our case, we want to basically we want to give donors a chance to donate anonymously. And there are people that do not want to be seen as donating to whatever, the AIDS Foundation. Huh? And you basically prevent donors. Donors say, okay, I don't want to donate to this organization because they're going to harass me to donate again. Huh? I don't want to be associated with that cause. So if you want to incentivize donations, giving them the option of doing so privately makes a lot of sense. And I think the state has a legitimate reason to make sure that the donor actually did donate, but here we have a cryptographic proof of that. So you can't falsify that and claim that you made a donation. No? And it has to have been your donation, and you can't give your donation receipt to somebody else because it's going to be tied to your taxpayer ID at the time of donation. But yes, it is quite possible that in some countries, we have lots of these things, that laws are saying anonymous donations are never tax deductible. Well, then those laws would have to be changed before the solution could be adopted. Also working on machine-to-machine or IoT payments with embedded wallets with TU Dresden. Working with TU Berlin on programmable payments. So we have already programmable money. For example, we can add age restrictions to digital cash and not disclose the actual age and preserve the privacy properties, but say, this money is not usable for buying things that are above, require you to be 18 or something like that. So lots of things happening on that side, also with academic contributors. More should be happening, of course. Especially with finance people, improved accounting integration. What are the accounting rules for merchants? We have all of the transaction data. How to properly render that? No idea. Personal finance management on your device. Again, your wallet has your transaction history. You could analyze it to death locally on that device, which is great. How should we do this? We're working on ideas like share tokenization, where you can not just tokenize money, but tokenize shares and possibly do e-voting on those shares to participate in cooperative decision-making, and more and more and more. Please share with your ideas.
Yeah, so can I ask that? And so like a lot of things realize, and it's a good thing that it is based on the individual's device, but is there any way to recover things if device is lost?
As I said, we right now you can make a backup, and iOS will make a backup for you in the first place. And we are working on making an easier incremental backup available for other platforms where it's not built into the platform. So right now you could do a manual backup, but we of course know, normal people don't necessarily do backups very well. So we want to make it easier to make backups in the future. That's one of the things we're working on. Yeah.
Do you think somehow it would be interesting or a waste of time making some test on people who are not illiterate or maybe they don't have dyslexia or anything? I mean, what would be the benefits for normal people?
We have done some usability studies with seniors in France, for example. So we're working with a group called eSeniors there. It's one of the nonprofits we work with that make sure, for example, it's accessible, that the fonts are not too small, that the user experience is smooth. We would also like to see if our solution for illiterate people works well for dyslexic people. Because 3 to 15% of the population in Europe is dyslexic, and some of them do have problems even reading numbers. So that would be interesting to see if the solution for enumerate people also helps dyslexic people. But normal users are relatively easy to study, and we've been doing that for a while. So the more fun research is the more specific target groups, let's say. Yeah. How can you support us? Well, we have a mailing list. We have tutorials. I should point out we don't just have tutorials, we also have lecture materials. So lots of slides with annotations. We would love professors around the world to start teaching our concepts, our ideas, all the way into the crypto, even though I think that's not so much for the finance professors. It's all there. Happy to talk to you and point you to the right materials. There's a discussion forum, bug tracker, source code available. There's also grants available if you are writing free software and want to do some integration work. The EU actually asked us to make it an open call, so people around the world, except Russia and North Korea, and Belarus, I think, can basically say, look, we have a cool idea for how to improve the system. We're going to do it with free software. You can get up to 50,000 with a very brief application. We have a translation service where you can help us translate the application into more languages. And of course, we have lots of documentation for how to integrate it with more systems that are out there. Okay, now for the workshop, the basic plan is we're going to install the Thaler wallet, do some demonstrations, withdrawing, paying, sending, invoicing, depositing. I'm going to give you a tour of the merchant backend a little bit to see what is there. And then we'll look a little bit at the REST API if you're that technically minded. Otherwise, you can just run out first. So now, before we go for that, just brief acknowledgements. It's, of course, funded by the European Union and the Swiss. Thank you for your money. We are trying to spend it very wisely. So, part 1 done. You want to see the demo, right?